Welcome to Talk Art. I'm Sally Rain, and I will be your host as we delve into the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by the Silicon Valley Open Studios. During the first 3 weekends in May, hundreds of local artists open their studios to the public. For more information, you can go to the website svos.org. Or you can look for one of the printed artist directories that are distributed locally to public libraries across the peninsula. Our guest is Peter Schenk, a digital artist who uses found objects through his walks of life to create very interesting digital art. Beautiful imagery. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about how you got involved in creating such art.
Well, my involvement with photography began when I was probably about 9 years old, and I got a Kodak Brownie camera, which I didn't use very well. But much later, I was in my 20s, I fell into having a digital camera and digital camera, and I used it to take all kinds of pictures around me. And then I began to realize that the kind of pictures I liked the best were sort of the odd ones, not the kind. My family always shot pictures of people standing in front of things when they went overseas. And so this time I was trying to find different combinations, and I found a technique even then that made it abstract, that I would take developer, and when I pulled it out after it had been exposed in the light.
So you were using film.
I was using film.
And what kind of film?
Tri-X for the most part, black and white film.
Black and white film?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got your developer, you're in your developer lab.
And I have a little atomizer bottle, and after I've exposed it to light, then I'd spray it with the atomizer and count to 10 and spray again and count to 10 3 or 4 times. And what that means is each little dot is developing at a faster rate than the one before. And so when you plunge into the stop bath, then it would freeze everything with all these little dots. And I like that. You know, I didn't do much work afterwards, but I kind of like that. But in terms of digital art, I got a digital camera, and I really enjoyed it because digital cameras, among everything else, are very forgiving. In other words, you don't have to use a lot of film. I know a lot of people who take 1,000 pictures and only save about 30, and you can do that, which you could never do with a camera.
No, you can't do that with film.
And so I have two different kinds of cameras. I have an SLR, which is not top of the line because the really expensive cameras, besides being expensive, are very bulky and large, and I don't care for that. And I also have a point and shoot, as it's called, and then I keep in my pocket or in the car, so I always have a camera when I need it. And with the technology now, the point and shoots are not that far behind the bigger ones.
That's right, exactly. You can get large image sizes. So when you're walking around, what are you looking for? What catches your eye?
I don't always go looking for things. Sometimes I just see something and think, well, that would be an interesting shot. Very often I find things interesting if I take them out of context.
Right.
If you weren't looking at, like, for example, I took some pictures of a crack in the sidewalk. Who wants to see a crack in the sidewalk? But all the little flowers that fall off the tree fill it out very nicely, and it looked very pretty. You'd never stop to look at that yourself, typically. But when I take a picture of it, you say, that's really neat. And that's the kind of thing I search for, things that are attractive in a way that's not expected.
So you are involved with some photography clubs in the area. Tell us a little bit about how that influences your style and what you do.
Oh yeah, photography clubs are really excellent sources of learning, probably better even than a class in many cases. I hadn't belonged to any photography organizations until I came to the Bay Area, and in about 3 months I joined 2 of them. I don't know why I joined 2, but I still belong to 2 after about 12,
Which
15
2
years.
did you join?
Light and Shadow Camera Club, which is in San Jose, and Santa Clara County Camera Club, which is kind of in San Jose too, but they call it. And the advantage to going to those clubs is, number one, you meet a lot of other people with your interests, and that's nice.
Right. And
secondly, you learn a lot of things from people just through informal talk. So, and then there's a competitions where your images are commented on and judged, and you learn a lot from all that experience. You find, despite yourself, you learn quite a bit.
So when you enter a competition, are there different categories? How does your art compare to somebody who does landscapes, for example? Do they compare them?
No, well, yes and no. The clubs I belong to have essentially, I think, 6 different categories. Pictorial, which is the most basic, you can put anything in there.
Right.
It's more commonly a regular picture. Black and white, or we call it monochrome, it's black and white pictures only. And then there's creative. And creative, you can do about anything you want as long as you start with a picture. You can't build something using a digital programmed just to build a structure. You have to start with a photograph, but then you can manipulate it all you want. And some of them look fairly realistic, and some of them look really, really strange, like mine. And then there's nature, and nature, I don't shoot much nature, but you're expected to take pictures of things in their own environment. You can't go to a zoo, and you can't do anything else. So you have to actually get out in the wild and do that.
In nature.
There's photojournalism category, which is, it could be anything that, but the subject of the image is more important than how well you do it, because you're out and things are happening, and you don't have time to set people up.
Exactly.
Sometimes people shoot sports in that too. And then the last one is travel. People go, you can go no further than Fresno and call it travel, or you can go to Sri Lanka. Those are the categories. And the advantage to all of those is that to the extent you want to be involved in them, you learn different ways of approaching film. Or a camera. I don't think I would have had that kind of diversity if I hadn't been sort of prompted by the categories they have. It's one of the reasons for the categories.
Right. So you are mostly involved in the pictorial, and what other categories?
Well, I do a lot of flowers and things, which we'll talk about, and those are pictorial typically.
Right.
I do a lot of creative things in which I could just manipulate things. They may start with flowers or leaves or whatever, or they may start with something altogether different. And I also do monochrome because that's kind of interesting. And sometimes pictures are interesting because of the structure, but the color isn't really add very much. And also, I want to enter as many competitions as I can because I'm greedy, so I do.
Well, and you like the feedback as well.
I like the feedback.
It's interesting. Yeah. So you have cameras, but do you use any other tools? Because some of your imagery looks like it's not from a camera.
You're right. It is. I have been using, probably for the last 15 years, a scanner, a regular flatbed scanner, as a photography scanner,
right.
In the sense that it'll take color and so forth. But otherwise, it's a scanner that would be on anybody's desk.
Right.
And I got it, I think, 8 years ago, so it's not even up to speed. But the advantage of it is you can see things very closely. You get a lot of, you can blow them up quite a bit and see details that you had no idea were there. When we look at pictures later, I'll point out those kind of things. But there are restrictions, of course, and among them are that you can't take a picture of much of anything that's further than about 1 inch from the glass. I mean, you'll be there, but it'll be fuzzy. So you have to have the right kind of thing. Of course, leaves are my favorite.
So you put them right on the scanner bed?
I put these things right on the glass.
Oh.
The scanner is connected to the computer. The computer has an interface in which you can tune the brightness and so forth, and then you say go. Or you can crop it as well, and you say go, and you get a picture. And it's surprising. Sometimes they take a long time, sometimes they don't. The interesting thing about a scanner also is that it has a certain look that seems sort of hyper-real when you do it. And what I mean by hyper-real is typically when you look at a three-dimensional object, you're getting light coming in from an angle, and you infer that from the shadows. With a scanner, there's a light bar that goes very slowly underneath something.
Right.
And you would think it would just blur, bleach everything out. But what happens is the scanner brightness falls off so quickly that even 1/8 of an inch further back is darker, and through that kind of sculpts three-dimensionality, and it's the same three-dimensionality you've seen in a way, but it's not quite the same you see. Right. So it seems sort of hyper, and people seem to like that.
Well, interesting. Well, you brought some imagery for us to take a look at, so let's take a look at some of your images now.
This one is crepe myrtle. It's a tree. There's a lot of them in San Jose. They flower in the spring, pink and sometimes white. And you can walk by them for years and never look at them, but I found that they had some very interesting structures that appear when you get close to them.
How do you get the dark black background from the scanner?
That's an interesting question, because the first, most obvious solution would be to put black paper behind the image. And that works fairly well. Very often you get grain from the paper you have to also take out later. But I discovered quite after about a year that in many ways you don't need to put anything behind it. Even in the middle of the day, if you've tuned the light to be just the right brightness at the glass level, by the time anything that goes past it bounces off the ceiling, it's below the sensitivity of the scanner and you get black for free. So, but the other side of it though is if you want black, you have a lot of dust and pollen and things that accrue, particularly when you're doing plants, and you have to go through there and clean that up. And if you know Photoshop, you can either erase it or you can paint it with black or something. There's another technique I've learned, which is if you have a lot of little fine points all over the black area, if you select it, if you don't know Photoshop, just ignore the next 15 seconds. If you select stuff and then you tell it to expand a couple pixels, it'll just swallow up those little dots. And when you shrink it back down again, they're gone. I could go more into that more, but that works very well. This is a closer look, even more. You can see the little fronds and things that come out from the flowers as they bloom. Again, you can see there's a lot of three-dimensional structure in there, which you would probably never get if you walk by the tree.
Right.
Even if you put them in a vase, you might not see them.
The light source is very interesting with the scanner because the shadows kind of draw in.
That's right.
It's very, yeah, I can see the three-dimensionality is amazing.
And here's one more look, a closer look yet, and it looks almost like a battle of the buds. And these are those kind of flowers, and they're just emerging, and it looks like they're fighting for the space, and maybe in some kind of sense they are. But if you look, again, as I said before, closely at things you don't expect to look at, you find very interesting structures. And you have to have some imagination to see them, I guess.
Right, and the scanner gets amazing detail. That's great.
This is another story. I got some leaves when I was going for a walk, and I go for late night walks very often, and I found some leaves, and I brought them home, went into my office, put them on the scanner, set it all up, and I could tell from the readout it was probably going to take about 10 minutes to scan because the bar goes very slowly if you want really high resolution. So I just said fine, and I turned off the light and went to bed. Didn't really come back in the office for a couple of days. And I came back 3 days later, the same leaves are lying right where I left them, but you can see on the right-hand side, these are two images put together. On the right-hand side, you can see what happened to those in the intervening 72 hours. They just curled up.
They're still all in the same
configuration.
configuration.
You know that
really
it's the same group, but you get to see.
couldn't do that with the camera.
Yeah.
That's really great.
That was kind of fun. This one surprised me. Again, I go for late night walks, and I found this. I don't know. By the way, I should say, I don't know much about flowers, and I take pictures of flowers, but if you ask me, what is it, I would say it's a plant. You know, that's as much as I know about it. My wife would know, but I don't know. So I don't know what this is. But anyhow, it was a bush of some kind with the white flowers, and I plopped it off, and I went home. And again, I put it down and scanned it and forgot about it for a day or two, because very often I just don't do that. And I looked at it later at the image, and I realized that flower had been crawling with insects. It's
Interesting.
and the reason they were very small, and you didn't see them. And the other thing is, we're not used to looking for insects at night. There's probably a whole population of animals and insects that come out at night, and we never see them. Anyway, so I went through here, and I saw there were a lot of them, and they're big insects, and insects that look like they're insects of the insects. They're so small. So it's the fun of it. And at that time, we were having a presentation in the Campbell Library, and I put this particular picture on the left side. Forget the right film. The left side. The picture is bigger, but these are just two pieces cut out of it. On the left side, on the wall, about 3 feet from the floor, so the kids could look at it.
Right.
And then around the corner, I took the version of it, as you can see here, and I had circled all the insects, and I said, can you find the insects here? And that was kind of a fun thing.
That's cool.
And I'm sure I missed a whole bunch of them, but of the ones I saw.
So these are two separate imagery. So if I were to see a display, I would see one
It's exactly
at a
the same
time.
thing, only I've gone in later
Right.
and circled the insects that I saw.
Very interesting.
This is an old leaf. I like leaves because they're flat, but also between the aging and insects and so forth, you get some very interesting patterns. I think they're interesting. Maybe it's because I belong to AARP. I don't know. I think old things look good, but they're more interesting. If you put a nice shiny leaf there, it won't be interesting in a few minutes. So I find a lot of old leaves and put them together this way.
So you found this leaf this way.
Found the leaf this way, and people seem to like it. This is a series of needle structures from a tree in our patio, and they all fell off at one point because I had forgotten to water it. And they came off in different colors, and I put them all together just for the fun of it. I wasn't really giving it much thought. And later on, I looked at this, and it looked like all those things were talking. So I called this the conversation.
So you didn't change any colors in this particular
No, they all were
scan,
their own color. That's what made it interesting, I think. This I call Windblown, but really it's just a plant that I don't know, it's a frond of some kind. I know where I got it, but I couldn't tell you what it was. That I got and put on the scanner, and then later on colored a sepia version. So it looks like it's blowing in the wind, but really there's no wind at all. It's just lying on the glass.
So you artfully arranged it to look like wind, or did you just set it down?
It's it arranged itself pretty well. I did do a little adjusting.
So when you adjust something like that, I mean, you've got some really brights in there, and then they fade off into the
Well, actually, I'm
sepia.
glad you mentioned that. I did two main things to that. First of all, it was a color image because pictures are always color and digital, but I inverted it. So I turned the black to white and the white to black. And then I colored it with the sepia color, and that gives it kind of a surreal look. So
yeah, it sort of like glows.
It's like a
from
negative
the
version
inside.
of the
Yeah,
plant.
it does kind of look like that, although I've seen grass seeds that
Sometimes,
look that way. Yeah.
Now this one, as you can see, it says he said, she said. These are fronds from a redwood tree that grows in our backyard as well. And I put them together, and I was going to have two of them side by side. And then I looked at it the next day, and I said, you know, this could be reinterpreted. So I decided to make the one on the left male and the one on the right female, and color them appropriately, as you can see, and have them arguing in a way with each other. And I don't know.
Look like they're conversing to me.
Conversing? Okay, they're conversing. Anyway.
So how did you get the color like that?
You can choose to select things and change the color pretty easily in various software. This is another version of that I made much later. This I made in the last 6 months. The previous one I made maybe 7 years ago. And this also struck me as a he versus she, or he said, she said kind of thing. Some women have said, oh, you just make me fat. And I said, no, that's not it. It's just
well-rounded.
Well, yeah, but yeah, in an intellectual kind of way, right?
Yeah.
A lot of variety where the guy is not as detailed, but he's strong. I don't know, these are stereotypes.
The more linear one is the male.
Yes, the one on the left is male, and the one on the right is...
The one that can multitask with branches
yes.
going everywhere
yes.
is the woman.
Yes. I don't know. This one...
Now, this one's definitely been manipulated. The background in this one is quite spectacular. Tell us how you did that.
Well, the leaves themselves came from a branch, and they were roughly that color. Then what I did, and I'm going to do some Photoshop talk here for the moment, but I drew lines around the leaves and kept lines around the lines and lines around the lines until eventually I had this sort of halo effect all around the leaves. Then what I do, and this is a technique I've used several times that seems to work, I pick two colors, in this case it's blue and black, and I pick every other section and have what's called a gradient where it fades from blue to black. Then every alternate one, I do the same thing, but it's changing from black to blue. And
so it's a series of gradients that are in
mixed gradients, yeah. This one I call Trinity, and I tell you, I cannot remember quite how I did that. I got the leaves and I scanned them, of course, and there were some other things, but the little frothy background, which I think really makes the picture, I have to go back and try to remember how I did that. I like it a lot, actually.
So the coloring, how did you choose the colors? Is there any particular reason for the bright blue?
No, I just picked something that looks right. I mean, a lot of times I just play around with something, and when it looks right, I stop, and I don't really have a reason for it.
How do you know when it's done? You can manipulate digitally forever.
Well, that's what I tell people. It sounds a little corny, but I say, you know, I just play around with it, and if I'm smart, I know when to stop. And it's not always much deeper than that.
Do you ever create multiple versions of the same
image?
Yeah.
Sometimes I do. Sometimes just in seeking the best one, and other times it's fun to have a variety of them, and you set them up accordingly. This one looks very abstract, but what it really is, that's the bottom of a Safeway strawberry basket with the little crinkly stuff that they used to wrap around oranges stuffed into it, sitting on the glass of the scanner.
Wow. So wow.
That was easy.
Interesting.
People say,
I would never have guessed that.
No more. I just set that thing up in probably a grand total of 45 seconds.
That's it?
Yeah.
Wow. You didn't manipulate it in Photoshop or anything?
No.
That's just the scanner.
I brought up the brightness of the color, but that's all.
Wow. Very interesting.
This one is a lady's watch. You go to a lot of antique stores, you can find them. And it's very interesting to see the details. Normally you don't ever see this because it's covered with a sheet of metal on the back.
So what kind of resolution do you have on the scanner that can create that fine detail?
For something like that, I would usually use, I could probably get around 600 pixels per inch, but I might have done it at 1,000 or even 1,500.
Wow.
The problem, of course, is that as the resolution gets finer and finer, the area that's in focus gets narrower and narrower,
right.
So you have to make a trade-off. This one I did some time ago. There's a plant there that's right next to a fence. You can see there's a wire fence, and it's sort of held together, wrapped around each other, and I just played around with the colors. The colors are in no way natural, and I saw what looked in the middle like a little guy in a top hat, and so I thought that might be fun, so I tweaked it until it looked more like a little guy in a top hat, and that's what happened.
You've seen imagery in the clouds and nature.
That's right. And this is the this is one I used to make into a fabric hanging, which we can talk about later. I think that's the last one in this series. But I like the pattern. I forget quite where I got the pattern. But if I'm going to put something on fabric, again, which we'll talk about later, it's very often I make it abstract and it has a rough sense of weave to it, even though it isn't obviously part of the thing itself. It seems to work better. So.
Well, those are beautiful.
Thank you very much.
So you mentioned fabric. In the studio here, we have some hangings that you've created that are beautiful fabric hangings. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that printing process and how you came up with that?
Okay, to be full disclosure here, I did not actually print. I mean, I made everything else, but I did not print them because I don't have a printer big enough to make something that large. There's someone very near me who has that kind of facility and does it for a living, and he does a really good job. And I take images, and I just basically you just blow them up and fit them into a 60 by 40 inch format. But again, I think if you make them abstract, they fit better on the fabric. And so then when I'm done with that, and they're, as I said, 40 across and 60 inches down typically, then they put seams. Ironically, the woman who does this is in the same building as this guy, and so the seam across the top where you put a piece of wooden doweling in, and that supports it.
Right.
In the bottom, you put a metal rod, and the metal rod holds it straight. I had them in 3 or 4 restaurants, and they're large and they cover the walls very easily, and they're particularly nice to move around because all you have to do is roll them up.
Right.
If I had a picture that big, I could never fit it in my car. I'd have to get a pickup truck just to move it. But the other thing is that in this I was caught by surprise because they're fabric and hanging. They can be very good noise absorbers for a public place.
That's a good idea for restaurants particularly. Yeah. Very nice. So tell us a little bit about the judging process. I'd like to hear more about how a judge might talk about an image. And you have some other images here that you brought. Maybe we can discuss them, and as you go, you can tell us a little bit about the judging process. Now,
I'm to judge my own stuff. If I looked at this, I would probably say, well, it's nicely balanced, but the colors are a little too intense. They obviously aren't real, but maybe that's all right if it's supposed to be abstract. What's interesting in this particular one is that I've shown this a number of ways to different people, and they seem to like it this way. But in truth, those things are hanging. And so really the picture upside down is the way it occurs in nature. But people seem to like it, right? So,
yeah,
so that's what I
more
do.
like a bouquet.
So a judge would, sometimes the judges don't like the borders I put around them, but that's a matter of taste.
Matter of taste. So here's another one.
That's a scanned leaf, and I put it against the sky background. In terms of found objects, for example, very often if there's an interesting sky, and in fact there was this morning over San Jose, which is very rare.
Beautiful.
And I unfortunately didn't take a picture, but take pictures to save them for these kinds of times. You know, so if I need a sky or grass or something, I've got it to go to. So this came out nicely. You can see here how well the scanner captures the depth, as I mentioned before.
Yeah, look at that. Wow. Okay, here's another one.
That's sort of a classic bouquet of flowers. I just put that together. And again, when you see this, if you really want to see it in its true state of being made, you would lie down and look up through a pane of glass.
So I was going to say, this is on the scanner. It looks like it's just...
So there's really not any up or down, practically speaking, but you want conceptually to make sense. And I thought the colors came together well.
Yes, very nice. Okay.
This is another one very much the same. I don't think the leaves and the buds come from the same plant. I don't recall, actually, but I think they're very
So when you arrange them on the scanner, they look like they're three-dimensional, but they're flat on the glass.
Well, but again, I say I don't put a top down anymore. So, in fact, also sometimes when I get leaves or things, I may actually wait a day or two because then they get sort of soft and they lie flatter on the glass. So this is one I took quite recently, interesting flowers. I have no idea what they are, but they have a very interesting shape. And it came out nicely, I thought.
That's great. And you can't really, when you do this, you can't really see what it's going to look like because the scanner sees it, right?
Well, that's a good point. I organize it the way that makes the most sense to me, but I also can see on the computer screen before I actually scan it what it looks like looking from the bottom. And sometimes I like something really well and I don't want to disturb it, but I have to because I have to move one little thing. That's very frustrating.
Oh, yep. So we have some more. Tell us more about these.
Again, a flower that seems really nice to me, and I have no idea what kind it is, but there it is. This is some kind of bud. Again, I'm sure a lot of people watching will say, "Oh, come on, you know what that is," but I don't. I'm sorry.
You're looking for the visual imagery.
The visual, yeah.
Exactly.
That's what I tell people anyway. This is another construction. These are seeds. You probably have seen these lying on the sidewalk, and I put them with these kind of grassy fronds.
The detail is just amazing.
The detail is amazing. Very hard to get that with a camera. This is more an exercise in color. The model part is a construction made from, I think, Photoshop or some other program I use, and just heighten the color in the leaves to make it pop.
And then you match with the border. I like the borders.
Yeah, I do too. I think very often, though, they don't look as good when they're projected, which is how the judges judge them. But.
Oh, that makes sense.
Now, this is
wow.
Yeah, this is really amazing. What did I say? This is Mariposa or something? I forget what this flower is, but it's got some amazing details, and when you lie them down on the glass, you see all this, and it's very pleasing.
Okay, we're going to go quickly through these.
That's a flower behind some grass. Next one.
Grass.
This is an even older leaf.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love the details in there. And that black is just amazing.
This is black and white. I don't shoot very many of these, but this is a tree in a
Was this must have been a photograph.
This is a photograph, and it was in a Japanese garden. It's very nice.
Okay.
And this one is a fish, and I had my car worked on recently in the body shop I go to. This fish is called Chubby. It's a puffer fish, and he always watches you when you come in, and he's the mascot, and so I took a picture. I gave them a copy of the picture too.
Beautiful. Well, your imagery is just
strange.
Well, it's very interesting in the way that you manipulate and visualize. Some of it's arranged, but not all of it. So very briefly, tell us where you'll be showing.
Well, Silicon Valley Open Studios is coming up, and I'm showing in 2 different locations. One is the Gallery House in Palo Alto, which is a true gallery, and I have a section of the wall to show there. And then I'm also in Alameda Artworks. Alameda Artworks is not a gallery per se, it's really a series of studios, but it's got wide halls that can be turned into kind of a gallery, and you can go in and talk to the artists, and so I'm in both of those. I don't do much work in Alameda Artworks because I do it on the computer and I don't need to be there. But that's the 2 areas where I will be in the next, in May, I guess.
Yeah, during May. Well, it has been great having you here on Talk Art. Yeah, and thank you for bringing in these beautiful images.
Glad to do it. I appreciate your interest.
Yeah.
Thank you.